Welcome back into A to Z here on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And again, give me a follow on Twitter at Markzino, MarkZinno. Of course, follow us here on Locked On ATL at Locked On ATL. Keep up with everything we have going on with all the shows here on the Locked On Network. Hawks have a huge game coming up tonight against the Charlotte Hornets, against the Cleveland Cavaliers, rather. They already beat the Charlotte Hornets. So they will take on the Cleveland Cavaliers with a chance to go to the NBA playoffs and take on the Miami Heat. And joining us now from Bally Sports South, Hawks on Bally at Twitter, I think is where they are. And she is the sideline reporter. It is Lauren Jbara joining us here on A to Z.
What's
Lauren,
up?
welcome. Look at that. See, usually when we do shows together, you're sitting in the host chair and I am the one who's here. Now we get to flip it around and welcome. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, thanks for asking me to come on. I'm so excited about this play-in game tonight. Obviously, not wanting the season to end yet. I hope we end up in Miami tomorrow. We have a flight booked to meet the team there. We'll be broadcasting the first game on Hawks on Bally if they make it that far on Sunday. So keeping my fingers crossed. I think it's going to be a good game tonight.
I appreciate you saying we like I could come with you. So, no, I can't.
We, the collective us.
You have a flight to Miami. I don't. I'm staying here in Atlanta. All right. Hawks in Cleveland. They get past the Hornets in rather easy fashion, and it was a game that I was kind of surprised about, not because they beat them or even not because they blew them out per se, but the way they did it. It not only was it Trae Young and like one or two other guys, it was Trae Young and like 4 or 5 other guys. I mean, 6 guys in double figures. And look, DeAndre Hunter having 22 points is great, but that's not typically his game. Gallinari having 18 points. He's not an 18-point kind of guy. So is it realistic to expect that they can get that kind of effort again?
I do think so. The Hawks are one of the hottest offensive teams in the league. And that was one of the things that we saw, right? That's one of the things that have been carrying them through this season. And that's honestly what carried them through the postseason last year, was their ability to really offensively have that firepower. And yeah, you talked about 6 guys in double figures. 2 other guys in that game against the Charlotte Hornets were at 8 points. So it was almost 8 guys in double figures in that game. And one of the things that specifically stood out to me was the ball movement of the Atlanta Hawks. It was Trae's ability to pass out of those traps, pass out of those box and ones, being able to drive the lane, kick it out for 3. But they were finding their 4th, 5th, sometimes even 6th option. They were sharing the ball. And watching them for 82 games this regular season and then one play-in game, they're at their best when they are sharing the ball the way that they did. And I think if they're able to do that against the Cleveland Cavaliers, it's going to be very successful for them. And they're going to be seeing themselves in Miami come Sunday.
All right. You, me, and 3 of our friends could score on the Charlotte Hornets defense. That's not the case for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, statistically on the year, they finished 5th in the NBA, allowing 105 points per game. However, over their last 10 games, they've been giving up 113 points per game. They lose Jared Allen to injury. He's not playing tonight. And so, this defense is a little bit different. Now, it's interesting to note, Lauren, that the Hawks in their last 11 games are now 9-2 straight up and against the spread, if you're into that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Their 2 losses were to Toronto and Miami. When you look at Cleveland, statistically, they are sandwiched defensively between Miami and Toronto. So I bring all that to light just to say that they're playing a good defensive team. It won't be as easy to score. What sort of challenges can they expect from the Cavaliers defensively?
Yeah, I will make note that those games against Toronto and Miami, they were close games through basically 3.5 quarters. It came down to the end of that 4th quarter in the execution. They were like 2, 3, 4-point games throughout basically the entire game, back and forth. And I remember working that Miami game. There was 17 different lead changes, and it was tied 11 times. So it just showed how close of a margin of error that game had. And similar to Toronto, too, in Toronto. I will say that Toronto game, that atmosphere there, like with everything going on with COVID, et cetera, those fans are wild. That felt like a playoff atmosphere, and it was game 79 of the regular season. So it was pretty crazy. I think we're in for a treat with that series against the Philadelphia 76ers. But back to the Atlanta Hawks. You look at a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, I think that not having Jared Allen is going to be a big thing for them, especially with his length, his rebounding ability. And I know they haven't been playing with him for a while, but it's just the way that the Hawks are set up right now on the offensive side. They're top 6 in the NBA in offensive prowess. And they're the only team in the NBA that have 6 players that have averaged in double digits throughout the entire season. The only team in the NBA. So they're getting scoring from everywhere. It is balanced scoring. The biggest thing for me is defensively. Can they step up against a team with a guy like Mobley who can facilitate and shut down those guys on the defensive side? And we saw that against Charlotte. Charlotte was the third best offensive team in the NBA, and the Hawks held them to 103 points. They were able to get back in transition. Clint Capella himself had 17 rebounds in the game against the Charlotte Hornets. So I think it's going to come down to defensively, keeping guys in front. Defending is a 5-man unit. Head coach Nate McMillan always talks about defending like a fist. If you're throwing a punch and your fist looks like this, you're not playing tight together, that punch ain't going to hurt very much. But if you have a tight fist like this and you sock a guy, it's going to hurt. So play connected basketball. Play with a tight fist like this. That comes from communication. That comes from knowing your spacing on the floor. That comes from defending your guy, whether you're defending with man on man or whether you're defending zone, and just making sure you know where you're supposed to be. And then I feel like their offense is going to flow from the defense. But the biggest thing to focus on in this game tonight is going to be the defensive prowess, shutting down Mobley, not letting him facilitate, and then also just not letting them, drive the lane and kick it out to the perimeter. Just stay solid defensively, keep the guys in front, and work hard in transition. Get back in transition. If you turn the ball over, get back, and make sure you're giving 110% the entire game.
Lauren, when you talk about that fist and the little analogy you used there, one of these little pitties, because if this little pitty is Trae Young and this little pitty is
DeAndre Hunter,
DeAndre Hunter, the little pitty that is John Collins is not there, and he is one of the best defenders that they have. But for me, I think John Collins' loss is more critical on the offensive end when you're playing good defensive teams like Miami, like Toronto, and like Cleveland. Because, look, I mean, other teams have to respect John Collins as a legitimate 20-point-a-night guy and a legitimate scorer. So they are going to have to put a body on him. Like, if I'm Cleveland, I'm sitting there, I'll let anybody else beat me but Trae. Right? Honestly, Trae should not have a above 35% shooting night if I'm Cleveland. Like, that's my goal. Do not let him get to the free throw line. Guard the hell out of him and force these other guys to beat me. As you mentioned, there are other double-digit scorers, but they're not 20-point scorers, and they're not 29-point scorers like Trae. And theoretically, that should be enough. And without Collins in the lineup to divert some defensive attention away from Trae, like, that's my philosophy if I'm the Cavaliers. Just make sure anybody beats me but Trae Young.
Yeah, here's the thing for me is they've been used to playing without John Collins since mid-March. I think the last time he played was March 11th. So they've really adjusted in terms of personnel and sliding guys over. And Danilo Gallinari has done a really good job stepping up into that 4 position. He has a lot of playoff experience. He's 32 years old, 33 maybe. So he's a veteran on this team. And he knows what this time of the year is all about. And even the games, because he's kind of been in and out of the lineup with some arm issues after he got tangled up in a game a few weeks ago. And even DeAndre Hunter, who's usually a 3, slid over into that 4 position. He was playing the 4 for a couple games and had some solid games at the 4. But Danilo Gallinari stepping up into that 4 position, he's been doing a really good job. The one thing I think especially that they miss about John Collins is his rebounding ability. He's the second best rebounder on the Atlanta Hawks, but Clint Capella really has been stepping up. And that was a big thing that Nate McMillan stressed too, is everyone needs to be rebounding, especially in the game now. Teams are taking a heck of a lot of threes. So there's going to be a lot of really long rebounds. So he even needs the guards like Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, those kind of guys rebounding too. It needs to be a full team effort on the boards. And so that's going to be a big thing. But yes, offensively, I think that the Hawks though have found a rhythm, and you look at their total of wins they've had at the end of the season this year, they have figured it out with John Collins. Yes, obviously it would be better to have JC back in the lineup, not just because of his basketball skills and his athleticism, but just his leadership. He is the leader. He is the captain of the Atlanta Hawks, and you even see him on the bench when he's been out. He's in the huddle. He's like sitting next to coaches, looking at plays. So it'd be good to have that leadership on the court too. But right now, offensively, they haven't figured out. They're clicking, they're moving the ball, they're sharing the ball, they're communicating. And just because John Collins isn't in, I don't think that, immediately translates to, hey, the Hawks are going to suck on offense. I think that enough guys are going to be stepping up and they know their role, they know their responsibility. Especially a guy like Bogey, who's been one of the best 6 men for the Hawks since basically January. He got hurt, obviously, had the ankle injury, then has been coming off the bench as a 6th man, and he's been putting up about 20, 25 points a night. So right from the start, if Gallo drains his first 3, if Kevin Huerter drains his first 3, if Bogey drains his first 3, all 3 of those guys are going to pop off and have a good night.
I don't want to ask this depressing question, but you know me, I'm so much fun. I'll ask it anyway.
Yeah, God.
If the Hawks lose tonight, how do you characterize this season? Is it a disappointment?
I honestly, hearing from Nate McMillan after the Houston Rockets game, one of the biggest things that stood out to me was he said, "We don't expect to feel like this at the end of the next season, feeling like we're clawing and scratching in for a playoff position." I don't know if I would say disappointment, because you look at the beginning of the season and Clint Capella obviously coming off of an Achilles injury, Kevin Huerter had foot surgery. A lot of guys, Onyeka Okongwu had his labrum surgery on his shoulder. A lot of these guys are coming into the season not having any preseason minutes, and they weren't in shape. So it took them a little while to get their lungs and their legs underneath them coming back from injury. And then guess what? They finally get into a rhythm like mid-November, beginning of December, and boom, COVID hits. 13 different guys in the COVID protocol list.
Yeah.
They had 9-10-day contract players at one point. I remember one game, Trae Young said he walked into the locker room, only 2 roster players were in the locker room. He's like, who are these guys? Who are my teammates right now? So they have gone through so much turbulence and tribulations throughout the season that, yeah, it might be a disappointment, obviously, coming off of going to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, getting hot in the postseason. But at the same time, you have to look at the season as a whole and what they've been through. It hasn't been every single guy, every single game. And I think that if it was, they would have had a lot more wins than they did this season. But you look at how they did finish. They have a better record this season than they did last season. And granted, yeah, they played 10 less games last season, but they were also 5th place with a better record this year. A worse record last year. So it just shows how much better the Eastern Conference has gotten, I think. So I wouldn't necessarily say disappointment, but I know that heading into next season, Nate McMillan and the players definitely expect more out of themselves. And I think that we will see that, especially with the contract extensions that got done. And then also just with COVID kind of slowing down a little bit too, and not having to have, those kind of issues like we did this season.
Well, look, we'll turn the page and not talk about the bad stuff, because you will get it. You will get a flight to Miami.
I hope so.
I will stay here in Atlanta.
I need to get bronze.
Lot of confidence in the Hawks tonight. So does the betting public, by the way, if you're into that sort of thing. Way too much of the betting public for my liking, but that's obviously a different conversation. Lauren Jbara, see her on the sidelines when the Hawks return to Bally Sports and they end up taking on the Miami Heat. Great to talk to you as always. You have a wonderful weekend. Certainly appreciate you spending some time with me here this afternoon. And don't forget to check out Lauren on Pickswise as well. We work there together. Check her out on Pickswise, but also at Lauren Jbara on Twitter. Thanks for the time, girl. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Zeno. Appreciate it. We'll see you in Miami.
Yeah, bye-bye. All right, that'll do it for us here today on A to Z. Appreciate you guys spending your Friday with us. Don't forget, we're free on YouTube, wherever you search your podcast, at Locked On Sports Atlanta. You guys have a great weekend. Don't take any crap from anybody. See ya.